I came around the corner in the taxi cab and I saw the marquee with my name on it. I was knocked out. When we opened that morning, nobody knew what to expect, and they let out a yell, and I tell you, I thought the top of the roof would come off of the building.
The one and only Frank Sinatra in one of his many heydays. That was the 1940s there. As you've heard in the news, of course, Frank Sinatra died last night of a heart attack at the age of 82. Alex Barris has been reporting on North American music for about 50 years, and we've asked him to come in today to talk about Frank Sinatra and his influence over all these years. Hi, Mr. Barris.
Hi, Tina. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Now, do you recall the first time you became aware of Frank Sinatra?
Oh, yes, indeed. I went to the Paramount Theater. I grew up in New York, and the Paramount Theater was like our second home. I went to see the Tommy Dorsey band, and I'd already heard about Sinatra by then. He was the new vocalist with the band. And of course, he was quite impressive, although he didn't look that impressive. He was a little bit skinnier than the microphone in front of him. Buddy Rich, who was the drummer, used to tease him mercilessly and pick on him. They eventually got to blows at one point, although I didn't see that. Sinatra felt very insecure in those early days, and Rich used to pick on him and tease him, and it really got out of hand so that they became bitter enemies, but later on they became friends again.
I was astonished to read in the obit today, you know, given that everybody went on about what a skinny little runt he was, he was a 13-pound baby.
Well, yeah, but something must have happened there. Maybe it was the Hoboken milk, I don't know. But didn't hurt the voice any. He was really a remarkable singer. I don't think we'll see his like again. More than anybody else that I can think of, he knew how to sing a song. He understood the meaning of lyrics. He had a way of conveying the meaning of lyrics flawlessly, so that you felt he was really singing from the heart. I know that sounds corny, but he really was a skilled craftsman. And that you have to give him. Because he, you know, he didn't read music even.
No,
I mean,
but his craft was entirely in, people say, in the phrasing of the song. Didn't Tommy Dorsey, in fact, teach him how to breathe? Didn't he learn that?
He learned. That's very true. Tommy Dorsey was a master musician, and one of the things that was very important to him was breath control, to be able to control his breathing so that he could play endless notes without anybody being aware of when he breathed. And Sinatra picked up that trick from him and later credited Dorsey with that. He learned a great deal from Tommy, yeah.
So what was it about his phrasing, you know, which is, I mean, I actually don't understand what that means because I don't know much about music. But there was something about the way that he sort of almost spoke his words?
It wasn't that he spoke his words, he sang, but he phrased in a way that made the lyrics make sense, rather than just going for where the rhyme was. It's hard to think of an example off the top of my head, but he concentrated on making the audience understand the meaning of the song by conveying the lyrics. The phrasing had to do with the lyrics, not just the musical phrasing in terms of intonation or where he took his breath, but in conveying the essence of the meaning of the song, and that's the lyrics.
Yeah, he always used to say that you're telling them a story,
exactly,
so they better understand it. So you have to stop and start in the right places.
Absolutely
now,
right. Now,
you met the great old Blue Eyes himself in the 50s, right? Can you tell me about that?
Yes, it was 1952. He came to Toronto. At that point, his career was in the dumps. Ironically, he had just made a movie called Meet Danny Wilson, which was almost autobiographical in a sense. It was about a crooner whose career was going in the toilet. And Sinatra was at the bottom of his career then. He'd had a string of bad movies and bad publicity, which he sort of generated himself. He came to Toronto to do a concert at the Mutual Arena, and I was sent down by the Globe and Mail to cover him. And of course, there was that big press conference with...
We're just seeing a picture here of him.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's a great picture.
That's an interesting picture. The young lady, I'm sorry, I don't remember her name. She was the girlfriend of the guy who took the picture. His name was Alan Richardson, and he was a photographer at the Globe and Mail. And over her shoulder, if you look, you can see me with hair, so it shows you how old that picture is.
Oh, you look just the same.
Anyway.
So when you met him then, he was not a big star, or he was in between his big
He was a big star, but he was not hot, you know. And they had a press conference for him, which was the usual pig fight with 50 people trying to get his ear, and that got me kind of nowhere. I got a few little driblets, and then I went back to my paper and wrote my story, and the managing editor called me over and said, this won't do, because the publisher, George McCullough, was a close friend of Sinatra's, and he wanted a lot more. So I spent the rest of the afternoon and evening trying to track Sinatra down. I finally got him in his suite at the King Edward Hotel, and we get a fairly comfortable interview on the phone, and that helped flesh out the story. So it worked out okay. But he was very defensive with the press. He'd already had some bad press, and he was very suspicious of anybody from the press. But because I was working for George McCullough, who was a friend of his, he opened up a little bit, and it worked out okay.
Because he never got over that. I mean, he always was not a fan of the press.
Oh, in fact,
because his press just got worse and worse.
It got worse and worse, and he became more and more hostile to the press. He had fights with press people, literally fist fights with a couple of them. Sometimes he was egged on because everybody wanted to kind of challenge him. But he got to the point where he simply would not talk to the press. And in a way, you can understand that. He became very successful and a very private person. Ironically, a year and a half after I met him, came along his biggest hit ever, and that was From Here to Eternity, which established his career as a dramatic actor and won him an Academy Award.
Now, he had his farewell concert, Ha Ha, in 1971. Obviously made a big comeback after that.
Yeah.
How do you explain his lasting appeal? I mean, to people who are, too young to ever have remembered him, in his earlier career.
Well, partly because he was such a good singer, because you can't take that away from him. Granted, in his later years, the voice was beginning to go, and it's always painful to see that happen. You wish he would just quit. But he had that aura about him. He had been the biggest and the best. He transcended generations. He was as popular as Elvis was. He was as popular as the Beatles were. New trends came, music may have changed, and yet audiences still liked him, and not just the older audiences, some of the younger people too.
I'm sorry, I got to stop you there, Mr. Barris. It's been lovely reminiscing. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina.
And that's it for our show today. We'll see you on Monday.
Year 1023 at 13.
Good afternoon. The world of entertainment has lost one of its most endearing icons. Frank Sinatra, Old Blue Eyes, is gone. George Lykojanis is standing by in Bravo with the latest on the passing of a legend. George.
Thank you very much, Laura. Frank Sinatra, yes, Old Blue Eyes, as he was affectionately known to fans all over the world, has died at the age of 82 of a heart attack last night at Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles. Here's a look back at the man and his music.
There's no sense to life without you, when all I do is just exist.
One of the first teen idols, Sinatra was known as the chairman of the board for his association with a group of entertainers called the Rat Pack. He released more than 200 albums over his 6-decade career and appeared in over 50 films, including an Oscar-winning performance in From Here to Eternity.
Who's the broad? It's my sister.
Fame began on tours with Harry James and Tommy Dorsey, but the legend began at New York's Paramount Theater in 1942. Highly publicized marriages to and divorces from actresses Ava Gardner and Mia Farrow kept him in the spotlight even when his records and films weren't selling. But his fourth wife, Barbara Marx, whom he wed in '76, was, in his own words, the love of his life. In a life filled with extreme highs and lows, it was always the music that made Sinatra stand out.
Without him, it'll be a very different world for me and for many performers. He was the absolute king, and is the absolute king of the entertainment world in our time.
Let me try again.
Frank Sinatra, dead at 82. A family spokesperson says that there's a private funeral planned, and to celebrate his life, Bravo, the New Style Arts channel, will be airing a Sinatra special Saturday of every month through August, beginning May 30th. Now, local fans were looking back at Sinatra's life in their own special way, and Tracy Melcher is live on Queen Street with that. Tracy.
Thanks, George. Probably no entertainer in our history has made a greater impact on our lives than Frank Sinatra, his music and talent reaching out across the generations. So today we went out and asked Toronto how they would remember this musical legend.
I think he was a wonderful man, and it's of a great loss in our society. I think he was the most important, shall we call, vocalist in the era.
Brought everybody to their feet, and he had such a great sense of poise about him.
In my youth, when he was almost like an Elvis Presley, you remember how they always yelled and screamed? Well, they did that too in the 40s. That's how I remember him.
I spent many a night at home listening to his records. When I'd broken up with a girl, or something like that had happened, I felt pretty lonely, and I'd just be listening to his records through the night.
I remember his music coming out of my parents' door when they were in there alone together.
Old Blue Eyes.
That's all I remember.
I did see him in a concert here in Toronto, his music was beautiful.
I got you under my skin.
I do it my way.
Obviously, Frank Sinatra will be greatly missed by a great number of people, including myself. Laura, it's back to you in the newsroom.
Myself too. Thanks, Tracy. We're gonna...
Yeah, he was on it. I mean, he was not quite as some people have described him. When he was alert, he was right there. And we had a very kind of special relationship. We used to joke around a lot. We had two relationships. One, when we worked, it was very precise and absolutely precision. He would show up early and wanted to get it done and get out of there. And then when we weren't working, then it was just playtime, and it was wonderful.
Do you remember the first time you ever you heard him sing?
Oh, no. I mean, I can't imagine life without Sinatra. And fortunately, the work that he left us with, he will remain famous and with us forever. Everybody in the world knows Frank Sinatra, and almost everybody has a favorite Sinatra song. So anywhere you went, in any language, people know him and know his music, and we'll have that forever.
And why do you think he was able to touch the world like that?
Well, he was complex in his simplicity, I think. He's the only person that I know of who can be fully described just by saying his name. He was so many things to so many people, and he had a way of saying things that made it feel that he was expressing our own feelings and our own opinions. And whether it was something that he was up there kicking or a very soft, quiet little ballad, it brought feelings forward in us that we've all had. And they stayed with us. He was, as they say, he was a piece of work.
Mel Torme said, he held the patent, the original blueprint on singing the popular song, a man who would have thousands of imitators, but who himself would never be influenced by a single solitary person. What did he think of his legendary status?
He enjoyed it. He was well aware of his popularity and of his power. And, but the interesting thing is, we'll remember his music, but I think he was as proud of his work with charities as anything he accomplished. When we did the special with him, the 80th birthday, we figured out that in his lifetime he had raised or caused to be raised over $1 billion for charity. And I think that's probably more than anybody else we've ever had. That was his focus, even if people didn't know he was giving to a charity. You know? There was a time there when nobody that asked him for a donation didn't get one. He sent a check to everybody.
Yeah, I remember recalling reading that he only wanted to do benefit concerts later
he
in
did.
his life.
He cared deeply about people, and that showed. And I think that was reflected in his music as well.
What was it about his background, his growing up, that you think made him be such a caring person like he was?
How long is this show? It was all of it. Where he grew up, how he got started, the fight to get where he was. You know, he almost died as a baby. And all of that came together to make this marvelous, magical, sometimes mystical human being.
Where did the nickname chairman of the board come from?
Oh, he had more names than anybody I ever knew. Chairman of the board and leader. Sammy Davis' father used to call him butter on the table, and he'd call him butter, which meant that working with Frank, they had butter on the table. But he had more names than anybody I ever knew. Cheech, and the leader, chairman of the board, Francis. A lot of people were better off calling him Mr. Sinatra.
Well, in the early years for him, he was so very handsome and that voice, but still had a bit of a time gaining some credibility. Can you talk about that and why that was?
He had more trouble, I think, gaining weight than credibility. Frank Sinatra was credible no matter what he did or where he was. Once he looked at you with those blue eyes, any credibility problem disappeared. See, I don't think he ever was not credible. He had ups and downs, but his his ups were higher than anyone else's, and his downs weren't really that far down, and they were quite temporary. He was a fighter, Frank.
Will you have a favorite memory of a time with him or experience with him that you'll cherish?
Yeah, I have so many memories of him. It would take a long time to touch on them, but we had fun. Jolene and Barbara and Frank and I would just go out and we would laugh, just plain laugh. And my fondest memories of him really were about the laughs that we had together. The concerts were awesome. You'd go to a concert and you would feel this wave, this powerful kind of impact of the audience's reaction, both the volume of it and the intensity of it and the emotion of it. And then we'd sit with Barbara and she would leave right at the end of the last song while he was doing an encore, and we'd go out and there would be a limousine parked right by the stage door. He'd come off stage, get into the limousine, to the airport, get into the plane, have a little Jack Daniels, and it was literally come fly with me.
A nice way to end this. George Slaughter, thank you for reminiscing about your friend with us. We appreciate it.